Broadcasting live from Youngville, North Carolina and Ontario, Canada. This is Got Mead Live, a weekly show where Vicky Rowe and AJ Araments bring you the mead news, meadery info, and mead-making discussions from all over, talking with mead makers, mead owners, industry mavens, and influencers. This is Got Mead Live, a weekly podcast about mead and the people who love it and where the mead world is going. And now here are your hosts, Got Mead owner Vicky Rowe and mead and wine maker AJ Araments.
Happy 2026, we are back. Welcome from the den of the puppies of the apocalypse in Northwest Michigan, the Bunny Pen in Ottawa, Canada, who has a new resident named Donut. I'm thinking Snowball. And the palatial retirement estate in Minnesota. It is Got Me Live. Welcome to the show. Tonight we're going to be talking with Ryan Carlson. Those of you that have listened to the earlier broadcast, we know we had Ryan on quite a bit years ago, and there's quite a lot of really good information on those, and he's back to do it again. So this is going to be a really good thing. I wanted to say thanks to all the folks who have been renewing and signing up for Got Mead patron memberships over the last month or so. You are appreciated. That is the only revenue I have to keep this show on the road, so it is very much appreciated. If you're not a patron member, it's only $30 a year, and we hope you'll consider it. You get access to the Got Mead patron boards on the forum and our patron Facebook group. There's a lot of really great recipes and information in there that are not necessarily in the open areas. So check it out. Gotmead.com/community is where the forum is. You can sign up for free there and get access to about 90% of the forum and pretty much the entire site. If you want to upgrade, you can upgrade once you've got your free account set up. So again, thank you so much. We enjoy doing this, and it's nice to be able to continue doing it. If you want to listen to us live, you can find us on YouTube, Twitch, X, and Facebook on the Got Mead page. We do have chat as part of our podcast, but we're also broadcasting on Discord, and the Discord link is in it's in the post, and I don't have it in here, so I'll have to give it to you in a minute. Twitch is twitch.tv/meadwench. YouTube is youtube.com/@gotmead. X is x.com/realgotmead. Facebook, facebook.com/gotmead, and Instagram is instagram.com/gotmead. Of course, you can find our main group at facebook.com/group/gotmead. And feel free to tweet us during the show if you want, or hit us up on the Discord. We're always watching that. So if you got questions or whatnot, and if you want to send us questions, you can go to gotmead.com, put your mouse over, but don't click on Got Mead Live Radio Show. Click the drop down. That'll take you to a form that you fill out. It comes to all three of us. So we will definitely see it. That's how we get our questions from Nathan every show. First show in years, we won't have had Nathan on here. So we miss you, Nathan. Feel better. Nathan's ill and he's got a cold. So. But all right, then I just want to put the word out on our fine and lovely sponsors. Discover Honeybrook Craft Mead with 2 Colorado locations to serve you. Visit our original Castle Rock tasting room and production facility, or our brand new Littleton Mead Cottage and Garden. Choose from our 20 taps of wonderful, light, and refreshing craft mead. Find us using your favorite map app, or visit us at honeybrook.com. That's HONNI brook.com. So, what are we drinking, y'all?
Well, I can start, I guess. I made a trip to the Michigan Mead Cup this past year and was graciously hosted by Annie Zipser and Jeff Meliot.
I knew I saw you there.
Well, yeah, I'm sure you couldn't have missed me.
Yeah.
And as is typical of Annie's meads, it's big.
Yeah.
It was made in April of 2022, bottled in April of 2023, which is her typical practice. And I've been saving this one in the fridge for a couple of years from a previous exchange. This particular mead is a date melomel. Spicy alcohol is the first thing to greet me with toffee and very light caramel, and it smells like it could have been wood aged, although, if memory serves, she's told me that's not the case. The initial sip is somewhat sweet, but there's enough age and tannin to keep it in the upper end of the semi-sweet range. Slightly oxidized in a pleasant manner, it finishes with date sugar, spice, and a hint of woodiness that lingers with a semi-sweet finish and some spicy alcohol notes. Certainly a pleasant winter sipper as I prepare for the next cold snap and snow expected for tomorrow.
Yeah.
Thanks, Annie.
Always nice to have an Annie mead.
Yeah.
What you got, AJ?
I am jealously guarding this glass of Kevin's Orange Blossom Muscat Pie Mint. The first words out of my mouth after the first sip of this were, "Oh my God." So thanks, Kevin. This is amazing. It's got a really lovely citrusy aroma, but it's not candy-like as I often expect from Orange Blossom, but I can taste it when I drink it. And there's this faintest bitterness on the back of my tongue, but it's really balanced with the overall sweetness. This is just divine. Thank you.
That's amazing. That's from 2018.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it's probably one of the first 20 meads I made as a mead maker. I'm surprised it's held up that well.
It says number 18 on the bottle, so yeah.
Yeah, I had one of your early ones that I poured. I taught a mead making class Thursday night, and I took a selection of the home meads that I have from friends and and people, and said, okay, so here's like what you can accomplish, because a lot of these people had never really had anything other than the occasion, maybe one or two commercials, and one of them was one of your early ones, and it's the same kind of thing. It just didn't hold up, which was a shame because it was a current. But they happen. I've had mine do that too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but this was, I think it was 2018 or 2019.
Okay, yeah, that's pretty early on. I started in 2018, so
yeah. So it was a black currant. Oh shoot, I can't remember the honey on it now. I did tout up your wonderful custom green painter tape labels that make your mead so easy to find.
Yeah, that's true.
They do. It's very easy. It's like, that's a Kevin mead. Snatch it right out of there.
Yeah.
I dug into the upstairs mead fridge that I am supposed to have rotated everything to the downstairs bar fridge, but have not yet because I'm lazy. And in there was a can of Gosnells of London's draft mead, their hibiscus, which is very nice. This is a 4% canned session mead. And I picked this up at Total Wine in North Carolina. So it's at least probably 2.5, maybe 3 years. I found it when I was at Total Wine for something else. It was like, oh my God, English mead. So picked it up. And I'm really surprised that it's held up. In my experience, canned meads tend to get a little metallic-y over time. And, they don't always hold up. This one is held up nicely. The aroma is very muted on this. You get a bit of floral, but it's really very self-contained. The flavor has held up very well, and you get a lovely tart hibiscus floral, and then the honey runs behind that, and it's very well balanced and just a real easy drinker. And nice long tart finish. I love hibiscus, I really do. And all in all, this is a great beach mead, or any other time for that matter, but it's definitely worth it. So if you have a Total Wine, and I think they may also be a Bevmo, check it out and go see the 4-pack of their canned meads. At least when I got it, wasn't super expensive. So no idea what it is now after 5 years of prices and things. So what about you, Ryan? What you drinking?
So I have several years ago, Wayne Gibbons had some of the most amazing clover honey that I've ever tasted in my life.
Oh, is that the cinnamon?
Yes. Yeah. A lot of people said that it tastes like Cinnamon Crunch cereal back, 40 years ago.
That's iconic right now. People will like pretty much kill their parents for for a jug of that. It's hard to
tell them to call me. I can hook them up. Anyway, I made a trad out of that. My son and I actually call that honey. We call it psychedelic clover because that refers to a culture and some of what the culture did in the day, but it's also like a kaleidoscope. It's just got so much motion in there and just tons of great expressions of a whole lot of things. And that was one of the best years that they've ever had. And Wayne told me that when they tested, it's almost completely nothing but clover and no other pollens in there. And so that's why that particular year, as we all know and understand, they change from year to year, but every once in a while you get these bumper crops. And I think for the most part, that's because it's mostly all pure clover. And then I also think about Tupelo that sometimes is just amazingly off the charts and for the same reason. So anyway, that's what I'm having, a very nice clover, traditional.
Yeah, you want Tupelo, I can hook you up.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's
all right.
St. Ambrose puts a lot of highs down.
Can you hook us up at a price we can afford without mortgaging?
I can talk to Kirk and see what he can do.
All right.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, but let me talk to Kirk and see what he says.
I think the last time I bought Tupelo, it was $12 a pound, and that was in bulk.
Yeah.
I remember in 2016, that was the year that we had a bumper crop of that stuff. I bought a 5, and to get it to my door was $750.
Yeah, totally believable.
Probably more than that. Shipping is so insane.
Well, do you want to hear the sob story about that? I had a fourth of the bucket still full and left, and I stuck it in one of my closets, but I had buckets stacked 4 tall all across the bottom of my closet. Well, dummy me, that 3/4 of the way empty bucket collapsed when too much temperature was on there. And then in the summer it got soft and it actually cracked open that bucket.
Oh dear.
And I didn't know until one day. It's like, wow, it sure smells good in here. And I started sniffing around, and that bucket had split open, and all of my honey had poured out on the carpet.
Oh man!
And do you still find honey coming down through the walls?
Do you want to know the truth? Yes.
Well, so I've had a somewhat similar experience when my daughter and her buds were all about 15 or 16. They were here for an overnight sleepover, and I had just purchased some honey that was in a glass jar sitting in the entryway of the house.
Okay.
And we had a thunderstorm, and the girls all decided, it would be really cool to run outside in the thunderstorm at 3 a.m.
Okay.
When they came back in the house, they knocked over the jar of honey, which promptly broke. They didn't realize it until they were all getting ready to hop upstairs and get in their cars to go home at 6 a.m. and they stepped in the lobby, and yeah, you can imagine. So for about 5 years, I was finding still, after significant cleanup, I was finding honey dripping down through the walls into the basement workshop.
Oh yeah. Well, that's like the port wine stain I had on my foundation at the old house after the 5 gallons of raspberry mead escaped the bucket. And
I mean, just we're all going to have those stories. It's just part of the growing pains.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I had banana meat on my floor, and I also had my very first batch popped the corks and shot one across the kitchen and dumped a bottle underneath my freezer.
Yeah, I had that happen on one of them stick together racks. They're made out of like dowels and chunks of wood with holes cut in them, and you just stick them all together and they look like a big old honeycomb. And I had it stacked like 12 high in a narrow space that was enclosed so that it would hold together. And I had a bottle on the top that popped its cork, and it dripped all over the bottles in the other 11 levels.
Destroying all the labels all the way down?
Not really, no. They mostly just got the necks and the corks, but I also had goo on the floor and everything, but I had to do a lot of cleaning when I packed everything up. It was like, oh, this one's still got goop on it. So yeah, it was not fun. But
these things happen.
Yeah. So those of you listening out there, you may or may not know who Ryan is, but Ryan's been around quite a while. I've known Ryan for a long time. Damn, 20 years now, something like that.
Not quite that long, but a long time for sure.
A long time, yeah. Since the Mazer got started. I don't know, were you coming around when it was the International Mead Festival?
No, just after that.
Okay. So yeah, then it's been Probably about 12, 13 years then.
Yes, exactly. Uh-huh.
Yeah, but anyway, so Ryan did a really long series of, on mead making from soup to nuts, both in the forum and then on the show. So there's a whole lot of that out there. If you haven't listened to the earlier ones, I highly recommend it. If you can't find them, don't panic. I'm still playing switchy changey with the new platform and everything, and some of the stuff didn't translate over well, so they got lost on the podcast out on the podcast platforms like Apple and such. So I am working on it, and it will eventually get fixed as it picks it up. So just keep looking, or you can get to me directly and I'll give you a straight up link to it. But in the meantime, though, Ryan is going to make the case, among other things, for open fermentation today, and also talk about some of the historical aspects of mead. So if you go to the article for the show today over on Got Mead, you'll see links going to some of the historical data that he's working with. So it's definitely worth looking into, especially if you're into the historical aspects of mead. In the meantime, though, Ryan, welcome. Let's do this.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. Good to be back.
Good to have you back.
Well, thank you so much.
So you were, 5 years you were kind of out of the picture, because I know you had a whole lot of things going on, but you were apparently also writing books and studying mead lore and God knows what all else. It sounds like you've been really busy.
I have been extremely busy. The downtime that my body forced me to have to take gave me massive amounts of time where I wasn't able to motor about much. And I think in the last 5 years, I've looked death straight in the face many times, enough that I've breathed the same breath that death was breathing at me when we were staring eye to eye. And I know at one point I came down with COVID and pneumonia in December of 2020, and I was quite sick for about 4 or 5 months. And then overnight, like somebody flipped a light switch, I instantly became too sick to even sit up in a chair. And I was that sick for about 7 or 8 months. And during all of that time, every day I prayed and asked God, am I going home today? Because I honestly thought I was going to die. That's how sick I was. And long story short, I bought some ivermectin from India and I started taking it. And it almost took me an extra 3 years to get out of that. And it's left me with some brain damage, which now doctors are called long COVID-induced brain damage, not just brain fog. And anyway, that still lives with me, this brain damage, and you guys will probably notice times where I seem a little lost or confused or double stepping a little. This is just something that I'm going to have to live with the rest of my life, and so I deal with it as best I can. And then I had a couple accidents where I broke up my bones very badly, and then I had a knee replacement that never healed. It's still a piece of crap today. And then I had heart failure 15 months ago, and I'm still on the road to recovery there. And so this last 5 years, I've probably aged 10 or 12, maybe 15 years, and I'm finally getting back to where I'm not struggling just to stay alive every day. And so that all of that allowed me to learn a tremendous amount of information, and I never did stop making mead. And so actually I feel like I know 300 or 400% of what I did when we made the last podcast back in 2017.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you're still on this side of the veil, man.
Thank you. I appreciate the kind words, for sure.
Yeah, and I hope that the angel of death didn't look like Andrew from Touched by an Angel. But that's cool though that you were able to do so much with having to deal with so much.
Yeah, it was a struggle for sure. I've never struggled like that for 5 years consistently, every day, day in and day out, and massive pain that is beyond comprehension. And it's terrible, but I'm a bigger and better man from it all.
Well, we're glad you're back. So you
Well,
were
thank
saying about you were talking about in one of your texts that you sent me doing, and I think you mentioned it too on one of the Facebook groups about open fermentation, and I am curious.
Well, so sure. Um, what I'll like to do first is I'll give a brief introduction to my first real life experience with the differences that caused me to become aware of some real life positives from doing an open fermentation. And
Okay.
for years, I've fermented in 50-gallon trash cans and small, just 5-gallon buckets when I was first getting started. And so I think it was in 2016, myself and a friend of mine, James Davis, we ended up making a single must that we then split. And Jim took home and made 10 gallons. We agreed on the exact procedure in every way possible. And so we were going to do the same thing. He was going to take the must home and build 10 3-gallon test batches using 10 different yeast, and I was going to do the same. So we had 20 yeast comparisons to do the A/B comparison thing. We agreed that we would do everything the exact same way. Oh, and also we had, I can't remember if it was 3 or 4, but we did 3 or 4 that both he and I used the same yeast. And so what we wanted to determine there was how, when we agree to do everything right, we do the same exact stuff, we could learn the difference between Jim's house terroir, if you will, the way that a man touches and handles things, and the little real small minuscule nuances, but those all add up at the end of the day. And so we were able to compare, let's just say we had D21 twice from his house and from mine, and we did that 4 times. And then we had 10 each of different. And I think a year later, we got together with with Jim's wife and my lady friend, and we sat down and we drank some of each, and just as if we were mead judges, which we are, we filled out a mead score sheet as if it was being entered in a competition, so that we could learn to understand the differences of each yeast strain and how they presented both tactily and the flavor profile and all of that. So I'm not elevating myself at all here, but what we found at the end of the day, we all thought that mine were, let's just say we felt that they were a little bit better. And Jim and I kept saying, and we had mashed our heads together for quite a while, and we couldn't figure out why all of mine seemed more lively, a little more fresh, a little more headspace, meaning the ceilings was taller, and so that allowed for things to live up on that top corner of the triangle, whereas Jim's were very good, and all of it was without any kind of flaws or faults, but Jim's was a little more compressed, I guess you could say, than mine. Oftentimes I like to use the expression, because I've been a musician since I could climb up on a piano bench, that if I plug in my guitar and I have a channel that's on the set as a clean channel, the tone is very bellsy, or like gongs, if you will, to a degree. There's a lot of space between each note, and each note rings out very distinct and differently than everybody else, but you can hear the chord, and inside the chords you can hear all of the individual notes. So that's a clean channel. And then also you can use the same guitar and the same amp and just turn up your preamp, and now you get some guitar rock and roll edged all the way to full on heavy metal, screeching feedback and whatnot. So oftentimes I look at clean mead versus a different setting on the preamp. Well, so finally we realized, sorry to take so long, we realized that I had been using open fermentation way back then, and Jim immediately, like most everybody else, locked his meads up as soon as he pitched underneath a airlock. And so that was the first notion of how an open fermentation can be very beneficial to you. And it allows, now that I know what's going on there, is it allows some very poignant differences that can be had by simply using an open top fermentation. Many people have this misnomer that, oh my gosh, I don't want to have my must exposed to oxygen because that's going to cause oxidation. And so then we learn to hedge against misnomers in our understanding when they're really not something that's violating the chemistry and the biology of the yeast and the changes that are going on chemically inside your must. And so from there, then I started to learn about the very earliest places in the world where we can see evidence of fermentation. And incidentally, from, well, the first one we have is 7,000 BCE. That was the first one that we're going to talk about here in just a minute. But if you then look at history and you move forward in the timeline, all the way up to modernity, to time right now, that's a huge expanse of time. But the fact of the matter is that the biggest part of the pie is open fermentation. And we've only just recently, let's say in the last, well, even 100 years ago, most of it was still open fermentation. So we're going to go back and we're going to look at some of the historic digs. We're going to look at what they left behind and what we can do then when we see the tools that they left behind, that they built. We can understand why they built them. We now know what types of juice they were creating. And then we can see their thought process of how the layout of the, let's say, the meadery from site to site. We get a look there, and by looking at the dots as far as the architecture of their meaderies, that indicates to us what their mindset was. It tells us how they thought, tells us how they understood things, and we can see that because it's proven in what you look around in the architecture. And so then we're going to go from there, and we're going to move forward all the way up to closed vessels. And somewhere along the line, we're going to make ourselves become small, and we're going to pretend that we're a single cell yeast, and we're going to jump inside of our fermenters. And so we're going to get small. We're going to jump in there and live with our little yeasty guys, and we're going to call that Mead City. So we're going to jump in and live inside of Mead City. Well, that's going to change our perspective of how we look at the processes. We're going to learn that the jolly green giant that sticks his head over the top of Mead City and looks down at us, he thinks he's in control, but in reality, he's not in control, because us little yeasty guys, we're going to do what we do based on biology and chemistry going on inside our vessel, which is actually exactly that. It's chemistry and biology. You're not going to change that at its core. And so if we learn that we're not the boss anymore, the yeast are, and we're just a nurse serving the cause of the yeast, then if we understand the procedures that's going on during all of this, we are given opportunities, little windows that exist only for a portion of time on the tape measure, that we can intercede on the behalf of the yeast and give them certain things that if we honor them, we allow them to make much, much better mead than what we make based on our assumptions, based on our ignorance of the science and the biology. and then we'll get into what some of those things are, closer to the end of the show.
Okay.
I guess it's your guys' turn to talk if you want.
Okay, let me wake up.
To me, it sort of sounds like you're boiling it down to the way beekeepers are. We think we're in control, but really it's all about the bees.
Mm-hmm.
That's
And all
exactly
we're
right.
doing-
So these
all
are
we're
You do
doing
want to
is-
create the right environment for it.
Yeah, all we're
and
trying to do is give them the right environment and the best chance at being able to do the job we want them to do, and whether
and
or
in the
not they
case
do it.
in the case of fermentation, though, especially on a commercial level, you're also wanting to ensure that you reduce any chances for bacterial or other contamination in the finished product, because it's going to make you more consistent. And that's going to save your business.
Are we ready to move forward?
I think so.
Okay. So the first place, and you guys, your listeners out there, Vicky's got a list of these different architectural digs. I sent that over to her, so you guys can get on and there's a lot of links that you can go all over the place about each of these different digs, and you'll see pictures, explanations of things. And so we're going to talk about some of these places. We're going to talk about what was left behind that we can now see as if we were archaeologists, and seeing what they did, materials they made their stuff out of, and how all of that was set up. We're going to learn that. Well, we'll learn a few things. The ancient, what I like to call the old people. I think a lot of people have this misnomer that the old people were, half monkey and could barely even communicate other than grunting and pointing. But we will soon understand that they were as intelligently bright as we are, way back at 7,000 BCE. And so the very first place we have is called Jaihu, and this was at 700 BC. And there was some pictures of what their community might have looked like. And they're standing there while they're leaning on their knees, and many of them are holding vessels up into the air as if I think it looks like they're worshiping their god or their creator, and they're lifting up. Some of them have what looks like are tortoise shells, which would indicate that one of the first containers way back then were tortoise shells. And then they must have made jars out of, reeds or like bamboo and, natural things that had a place where you could store their drink. And so then when you look at that, it looks like they were giving their best juice to whoever it was that they worshiped. But if you look around and look at the architecture, what you're going to see you're going to see wide mouth jars that have an incredibly large opening at the top. And so we're seeing simple forms, and yet there's no indication or no intention of that being of the nature of a sealed fermentation vessel. These are all open top fermentation vessels. We also see earth-stained ceramics pulled straight from the habitation levels or layers in their cities. What this tells us is that there was never any intention to change what they did. Now, they didn't discover fermentation, at least not then, but what they did learn instead was they learned through doing a repeatable process that if they connected the dots in the right way, they didn't know why, but if they did that time and time again in the same sequence, they ended up getting the same result at the end of the day. And so from the very first look, we realized that fermentation was never intended, at least back then, that they had no intentions or no reasons to even think that they should close their vessel tops.
Okay.
Your turn, you guys. Anybody want to jump in there?
Well, it's not like they had airlocks.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
It's not like they had airlocks, and you don't know whether they covered things with like cloth or something like that to at least keep the bugs out. So I know here I could never do like completely open fermentation. I get too many fruit flies.
Yeah.
I'd have to
But
cover
you
it with
see,
at least
here-
cheesecloth.
And I understand exactly what you're saying, AJ. And to be clear, when I was doing my open fermentations, and I still do, I also kept, a God's type. Well, like
Piece of
some of the best things you
cheesecloth
can
or
use
something.
is a fermentation bag, right? The screen
Oh.
bag that you can put up there to keep the bugs out.
Yeah.
But think of this: humanity has lived for the biggest part of existence, and they didn't give. I don't think they cared at all about the bugs in there because that was part of their ecosystem. They probably ate food every day that had living and dead bugs on it. They didn't have any kind of cooling for refrigerant. They didn't understand viruses. They didn't understand any
Temperature
of the
control.
right. They didn't have any understanding of the microbiology world. And so I think that we've only gotten, only 100 years ago, they didn't have refrigerators there. They had an ice truck that came up and down the street every day, and you'd run out and buy some ice from the ice man, and you'd run in your house and you'd put it in your little Coleman cooler, whatever that was back in the day, right?
Ice boxes. Yeah. I've still got
Yeah.
one, actually. I've got my
That-
grandmother's ice box.
Sure. And my grandparents did the very same thing as well. And so this is the very first time that we see in history of open fermentations. Now we can go further back in time, and I think it's in France. I'm almost certain that it's in France that we find the very first and oldest place in the entire world, as far as those that are supposed to know these things would say. There's drawings in the caves that would indicate, without saying it, that people were knocking down beehives out of trees. And then there was some things that it would suggest that they made mead. And I think that everybody says that mead was the first known fermentation drink known to mankind. I'm almost certain that Joe and Rick were probably walking around in the jungle with their clubs, waiting to beat on something to take home for the family to eat breakfast. And Joe tripped and landed his face in a mud puddle that smelled different. It smelled sweet, and he probably tasted it. And a few minutes later, he's like, what? And he hopped a buzz and he said, hey, I kind of like this. And so then maybe they realized that some of the honey fell into the water. But anyway, that's, I think, what most scientists would say is the first indication that mead was the first known fermentable to mankind. We go to the next place.
Sorry, guys.
And
We had a drop out there, so if you heard a gap, the system just reloaded itself. I don't know what the heck it's doing.
Okay.
No gap from here.
the
but
next
who
place,
knows?
and so here's what I'll do. The next place is between 3,500 and 3,000 BCE. So almost 3,500 years different from the very first thing that we looked at to the second one. And again, what we see, and I'm going to try to make this a little shorter, walking through archaeological digs, but you'll see a common denominator here always. And in fact, as we grow closer to modernity, we see that production scales grew larger. They became more cohesive in as much as a procedure that started here and then it moved to here and then it moved to there. So they already they could recognize patterns, and they were following those patterns with deep intention. Their tools changed some, but in the second place, we have shards of pottery that are broken and only portions of pottery. But again, they don't indicate that there was ever a covering over the top. That tells me two things. They had no idea what oxidation was. if you really want to know the truth, yeast love to be in an open fermentation vessel early on, because I'll teach you later that gives us an ability to take advantage of certain things that fit with the nature of biology and chemistry, where if we do just a couple things differently that cost almost nothing and they're so super easy to set up that it's ridiculous. And of course, this all flies against everybody that instantly wants to put their meat under an airlock. But if you get down inside Mead City and you look and find out what do the yeast really want here, they want an open fermenter because they don't have any osmotic pressure above them, and so their weather can breathe easier in and outside of the top of the water. They love oxygen, and they'll eat up every bit of oxygen you can get them until they go anaerobic, which roughly is about the time that high Krausen stops. And then they go anaerobic, and now they can't use oxygen anymore. And so over and over again, we see the ancient man, the old people saying, this is what we do. And let me ask you this. If some guy would sit there and carve out a huge 55-gallon trash can out of solid granite to make their meads in, would you think they would do that if they weren't completely and 100% satisfied and living in faith that this is really what we do, and we're going to spend the time to cut our 55-gallon trash cans out of granite? And then there was no lids, and they also didn't try to seal. There was no pitch or anything where they were trying to waterproof these vessels. And we can see that over and over. And when you go and look at these pictures, some of these urns that were dug down into the ground, and then later they started making pottery, and they would bury the pottery in the ground. And then eventually there are some pictures that have some lids on them. But obviously some of these things were never built for a lid to even sit on there, and it's clear by looking at the pictures. But as we walk through these different places, what we find is that, as I mentioned earlier, they're really starting to be very intent on how they build their local meadery, probably in, downtown city square, whatever that meant back then. But you even see the invention at some point in time around the Romans where there was, I don't remember what it's called. My COVID doesn't let me remember this, but in American Indian legend, and it's not legend as far as, a fairy tale, but they used a mano and a matati. Many of you will know what that is. It's like a stone bowl, and then it also has a stone handle or like a big loaf of bread that fits exactly in the same channel that was in the bowl. They would put grain in there, and then by rubbing back and forth with their body weight, they would grind the grain down into broken grain. And of course, we know that allows access for the water to change those into sugars. And of course, temperature eventually taught us that we can do an even better job than that. But even still, at this point, they had no idea why this happened. They just knew that if we do the same thing over and over, we will get the same results. And so as time rolls on, we see that they were more dedicated to their process. They started to understand things through what I like to call divine accidents. God showed them a trick here and there, and they probably thought they figured it out themselves. But in any case, they began to evolve. And then we can walk through where we come to the medieval times, and still they didn't know what a yeast was. They knew that if we used this same old wooden pot to ferment in, we used the same water, we put the same stuff in there. They stirred with the same giant spoons or stir utensils. They did the same exact thing. And actually then they did start putting lids on things because they became, further evolved. But nevertheless, they didn't know what they were doing other than following the same process. And so what that tells us is they didn't discover how to ferment. Ferment showed them the way, and they honored the ferment, still not knowing what the science, they didn't even know what science was. And so actually, we as humans didn't know that yeast even existed until Louis Pasteur, a scientist and an inventor in France, made like a glass swan, if you will. And so it's like it has the body of the swan and then a long neck, but then that neck turns back down and faces towards the ground rather than a trumpet or a flower blossom pointing up into the sky. And so he did that, and then it became eventually clear to them that yeast was an airborne, invisible something, and it was able to even flow up through the glass goose that his face was looking down. And that was the first time then that they understood that there was microbiology going on, and somehow they tied that to fermentation. And so they didn't really even know that yeast was the culprit until 250 years ago. And then, of course, he's the scientist that now we call pasteurization. He was the guy that was named after with this experiment that he stumbled on yeast. But prior to that, all the people that were doing the thing, they didn't know for sure. And so some of it was built around folklores and legend. Others became part of a religion. And so everybody had this way of trying to understand it, kind of like we do now. They didn't really know the truth, and so they filled in the gaps. But actually, they filled into the gaps with the wrong understanding because it hadn't revealed itself yet to mankind. But they would argue, they'd sit down around the leather wall, and they'd all be arguing just like we do in the Facebook groups about, well, this or that, or, Grandpa didn't use this. And so this is the nature of groupthink. When you sit around as craftsmen, if you will, talking about this and that, that's been going on since that first time when Joe and Rick were walking and fell and landed their face in a mud puddle. They started arguing the next day about what's going on. And it still happens, but unfortunately, it's all based on mostly bad science, make-believe, traditions of man. And then that brings us all the way up to modern fermentation practices. We know a little bit more. And so we have an idea, an understanding of the micro world that we never did until only recently. But now here's the problem. People started to hedge for imaginary monsters that are out and about lurking to ruin your mead. And so here's the example I like to use. People were building bear traps to catch the bear that's going to come, and yet there wasn't even a bear on that continent. And so now in today's world, we do all these silly things, and people mean well, and the people that teach them, I'm not pointing at anybody and trying to make them feel lesser. We all learn and we all grow, hopefully. But so much of what we think, this has got to be the thing and this is why, you're believing in bear traps that you've never even bothered to go find if that story held water or not. And so eventually we're going to start debunking a whole bunch of misnomers, bad science, and traditions of man. And we're going to let the science and the biology prove to us what's for real. But what we want to do before we jump into the math and the algebra and the cellular science, what we really want to do is we want to get small. We want to jump inside of your fermentation vessel, your fermenter. And then we're going to, the movie The Matrix, you're living inside of this different setting in life and it changes your perspective about everything. What we really want to do is we want to make ourselves small, jump down in our pot and let the yeast and the biology and the science teach us what goes on, whether we believe that works or not. Here's an example I like to use. The Wright brothers learned how to fly an airplane because they understood the physics law of gravity versus lift. Well, that's a law that was made by, I believe in God, so I'm just going to use this, and you can interpret that however you want. But those were laws that were unseen, but yet they've been there since the beginning of time, and had these guys back in 7500 BCE known about lift versus gravity, they could have flown an airplane back then. And so whether we know and understand these things and nod to them and accept them and say, okay, yeah, there's things that I don't see and I don't know yet. There are people that see and know those things. And if we choose to be humble enough to say, I guess I don't really know all that I think I know, and at least open up our minds enough to consider that maybe there's things that are truly have been established from the beginning of time that I know nothing of. It's only once we have that pose or attitude that we can start to consider other things, and then we can wrestle with them and decide if we think those things are true or not.
Okay.
Anybody?
Nope. I'm just stoking it all up here.
Kevin?
Well, so I mean, as far as all the background, I'm not really going to argue with that. I would suggest that one of the big reasons that people started covering their fermenters is because they started to understand that there are other factors that influence the outcome of their beverages.
So I won't argue that, but here's what I will say. So many people are afraid of things that aren't going to happen, and they start building what they do based on threats. You're a science guy. For anything to live inside of a must that's made to make mead, it's almost impossible for anybody to live in there. The pH is so low that's caustic enough that almost nothing can live in there. If you pitch the right amount of cell count with your cultured yeast, most of those are warrior yeast, they're killer yeast. And let's just say, okay, what about wild yeast? There are a few strains that can go up the ladder a little bit, but most of the wild yeast die of alcohol poisoning before they get 3%.
I don't think that's true.
Well, look it up, bud.
Actually, Kevin, someone who
promise.
was studying that did find that there's a couple that will go up till 8 or 12, but most of them
I just said that.
Yeah.
I thought I said that. I said there are a few, but they're very rare. And even though we know what they're called, Banyans is one, for instance. You're only going to find a culture that's been actively growing and evolving for hundreds of years that can withstand these things through them evolving over time. But even then, they're only in certain places in nature, very few. And so I think that if we're concerned about the bad guys, I'll just call them all the bad guys. I think that if you do your sanitation like we're supposed to, I think it's almost impossible for the bad guys to have any effects at all. Especially Go ahead.
In general, I'll agree with that. I think mead is more resilient to contamination or other factors than, for instance, beer.
I agree totally with that. Yeah,
and
we're not
and
talking
that's
about
also caused because of the basic chemistry of beer grains and malt, right?
Yes,
because there's a lot of scaling characteristics that exist inside small grains that are not present in honey. So
I agree 100%. Yes.
Yeah.
But
so
here's my point.
We're right on track.
Okay, but here's my point. I'm not teaching people how to make beer.
No, I know.
But-
It's
Yeah,
comparing
yeah,
it to other fermentations where
I
a lot
understand.
of mead makers come from.
I understand, and I appreciate that, and thank you for your input. And please don't stop. Trust me, I'm the last guy that wants to tell somebody that it's my way or the highway. But I can bring receipts big enough to drown Mount Rushmore with anything that I'll stand on saying I know that this is the science. And I could be wrong, but I'll either tell you that I have experience in this and I have receipts that I could bring almost instantaneously, or I'll say I don't know. I've never had any real life experience with this, but I kind of have some ideas about that. And so I'll be very clear if I'm teaching from experience. I'll be very clear if I have receipts. And in fact, I have so many receipts that if I happen to touch on something and I don't, I will mention that. And then the very last thing is some people love this science. And you know what? I make so much mead, I couldn't even drink. If I start, I
understand that problem.
Well, and let me tell you this: most of the meat I make, I give away for free.
Yeah, we all have brewing problems, not drinking problems.
Yeah.
And I have my problem is I love the science of making stuff.
Yeah, I do too.
Mm-hmm.
I'm the mad scientist in his little laboratory, proving and learning and growing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not about ethanol. A good friend of mine that I've known for 40 years, just last week, he hurt my feelings quite a bit. And he said something about, gosh, Ryan, the amount of meat that you make, surely you must have a drinking problem.
Oh, dear.
I know. And he just had a heart attack.
A storage problem.
That's right.
Yeah. I have a fermentation problem. I don't have a drinking problem. Shoot, I think I drink this. This is the first mead I've had in a week and a half.
Well, my friend told me that since he had his heart attack, he stopped drinking, and or at the very most, he might have maybe a half a glass of wine once a month.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and then I turned around and I said, listen, Scott, I make hundreds of gallons every year, but this isn't about ethanol. I mean, I have to have ethanol in my chemistry equation, because that does a whole lot of things in the chain reaction that we don't get without it. And if our yeasties didn't make ethanol, we couldn't make mead because it's part of the deal. And I told Scott, I said, listen, bud, I understand why you would think that, but I'm going to tell you right here, for me, making mead isn't about the buzz, because I could sit down with a 2 ounce pour, and because I love to smell it and play with it and look at it and then taste it and parse it all down to, I'm getting this and that and the other thing, I could spend 2 hours with a 2 ounce pour in my hand and just enjoying the crap out of it. And if it takes you 2 hours to drink a 2 ounce pour, you're not going to get even the slightest bit of a buzz.
Yeah.
And so for me, it's about two things. It's about learning to be a yeast cowboy. We actually, if we understand this completely, we are in the business of yeast husbandry. And then the second thing, that if you can't be a good culinary expert, you could know all the science in the world and still not make a decent mead because you don't know how to make flavors.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're a yeast cowboy, and we're a professional chef. And we have to know the science. Otherwise, we're doing nothing more than putting a blindfold on, grabbing some darts, and hoping that we can just throw a dart in the blind. And the very best we might do is hit the wall. And we're not even talking about hitting a bullseye or even, the bigger target. And so when people don't understand the science, they're left with bad understanding. They're left with a very, very small chance of making anything more than, maybe it's a little bit all right. And probably very few people, unless they're, have other mead friends and they're involved in the mead world where we're, we go and judge competitions and that kind of thing. I'll bet a lot of people, they say, well, mead's not really a thing at my house. And I think to myself, well, you've already told us why, because you don't have much respect for the mead, and it's not a thing at your house because you haven't bothered to spend the time to learn how to make good mead. And so here's a few debunkers that always frustrate me. People say, oh, well, I don't want to stabilize my stuff because I don't want to use any chemistry. Well, the whole damn thing is chemistry from the very first time you clean your gear, you sanitize it, you're already employing chemistry. Any of the things that we use as fining agents, as stabilization, any of the adjuncts that we feed to make different nuances, both tactilely and or aromatically, those are all natural ingredients. And so when people say, well, the Vikings didn't do it, the Vikings did it just like the guys at 75,000 BCE and us, because it's a chemical reaction in the pot.
Well, they didn't know it was a chemical reaction. They just followed the
I understand. Yes,
So,
that's true. But that's my point is this: that chemical reaction happens whether we agree with it or embrace it.
So I
or
totally agree.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm 100% on the chemistry. Don't get me wrong. I think
I know you are.
There's like basically there's two approaches you can take to the whole deal, right?
Mhm.
One is process. Focus strictly on process. If you follow solid process without knowing the chemistry, you can actually make really good mead.
That's only if
kind
the
of
guy
like the old German purity law for brewing, right? If you follow those processes, you'll make very good beer.
But
they
that don't
didn't
make
understand what was going on in those processes. They developed processes that were repeatable and could produce consistently good product for the times. Could they make better if they understood the chemistry more completely? Undoubtedly true. And that same is true for us. So we can teach people to make good mead through the use of good process without them understanding all the things that are going on in there. On the other hand, they can be better mead makers that don't need to have a recipe because they actually understand what's going on and are able to extrapolate from that more advanced information.
I totally agree. And here's my point, and I'm not trying to put anybody down. I realize some people, they just give me a recipe and they don't want to learn how to make mead. But you talked about we could teach people to make beer and they could be good. They can make good beer even if they don't understand the science. But if they have a good output, somebody understood the science well enough to give them a recipe that works.
Or they understood the process well enough.
Yeah.
That's my point. That's why we're talking about teaching and learning process, because if you learn the process, you don't have to get on the internet and beg for a recipe.
Because you've got the one thing that always works. But then what happens when you want to do something different, right?
That's
where the
point is
chemistry and knowledge comes in.
My point is this: if you have to ask somebody for a recipe, I don't consider you a mead maker. I consider you a somebody that can put together a recipe.
Okay.
And so you can make biscuits at home because the recipe's on the box, but you're not a bread maker. You understand what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, no, I get it. You're a baker.
Sure.
You're not a chef.
Yeah.
Well, or you could,
maybe that's not even fair to the bakers. I'm sorry.
That's what I was just going to say. It's not fair to the bakers.
Yeah. You had to say like you said, you're a bread maker, not a baker.
Right.
Yeah.
And so what I want to do is help people to go beyond. I'm sure all of us here in this podcast can sit down with a napkin in our hand at a restaurant and write down a recipe in 10 minutes time at the most. You'll know exactly what yeast you want to marry with your honey, and that'll also consider what your adjuncts are. And so you put all of those things so that they support each other, or maybe spread some diversity there. But when you know how to make mead, you can sit there and I've made over 300 recipes of my own, and I've only probably made 10 recipes in my life. Because right from the very beginning, when I first got on, I made some total crap by following some recipes off of YouTube, and it was so full of fusels. I couldn't understand why I would drink a 6-ounce pour And 45 minutes later, I'm crashing into the walls, walking to my bedroom because I got a headache like a caveman just clubbed me with the stone rock on the end of a stick. And I'm trashed out of my mind. I can hardly walk. I have a migraine that would kill you, and you'd be praying to die because you're drinking fusel alcohols. And so it didn't take very long at all before I said, you know what, I can ask 5 different mead makers a question and I'll get 12 different answers. And eventually I just said, man, you can't get any truth here because there's just so much bullshit being spoken about that I just said, screw this. I'm just going to go start to learn myself. And at the end of the day, I'm sitting here reading high end stuff where I had to have a dictionary right next to me because every other word I didn't even know what the word meant. And now I could speak in that postgraduate science about this stuff. And so that's what I want to do is if people want to learn to be a real mead maker instead of a recipe guy, we can help people grow into that. But you have to have the interest. You have to be willing to pay the price. You pay the tax when you're learning, and that's hard work. And then you got to prove it by doing A/B comparisons all the time and this and that. And like so many other things, if you have somebody that's a little further down the road than you are, you can grow through the learning curve way faster than if you do that on your own. But I had to do it on my own because there wasn't anybody that, I won't say there wasn't anybody that could teach it. But the problem with the Facebook groups is there's so much noise and disrespect to the old people that most of the guys that are on these pages and could help, they just don't bother saying a damn thing because they're tired of getting demonized every time they shine the flashlight in the room and it exposes it shows that the emperor doesn't have any clothes on. And so then they attack the messenger without even considering what's in the message. And that's why we have the old guys that never are around to teach because they're tired of the BS.
Well, I know at least for me, the thing that keeps me from posting real regularly on Facebook forums is the fact that there are some really fantastic, well-written resources out there that walk you through all the process and a lot of the science.
Yep.
Those questions that are asked every single day, 1,000 times a day, have already been answered at least 20 or 30,000 times.
Yep.
And you get a little tired of answering the same damn questions every single day.
And Facebook
the
specifically
resources
makes
are
it
there.
impossible to search well.
Right. I mean, go search. It's not that hard. It's not.
But people don't want to invest the energy. They want an easy way out.
Okay.
Well,
That's kind of where I was going, Ryan. So just stay with me.
I'm sorry. You can tell I get involved in this.
There's a good wiki on the Reddit
that
walks you through all that stuff. There's a whole bunch of great resources on Got Mead that walk you through it. There's a bunch of stuff on some of the Facebook pages that walk you through it. All you got to do is go through there and read. And if you do not understand something that was written there because it was written poorly or it used terms that you don't know, then come back and ask. But don't ask the same questions over and over and over because you're lazy. Because if you're that lazy, I'm not energetic enough to correct them for you anymore.
I agree.
I don't have that amount of time available.
You guys are given like 14 paragraphs to. I just would come out and say, do your own homework.
Yeah, but I don't even do that. I don't even write the paragraphs anymore. I used to.
Yeah, but no, I mean,
I think we all did. We sort of all did our time saying, okay, we know we can help, and then we get tired of answering the same question 25 million times.
But if you come at
and if someone had just read the FAQ, they'd know the frickin' answer themselves.
Yeah.
Right. But if you I was just going to say, if you come at it with, wow, I read this and I didn't really understand it. What does it mean?
Yeah.
Then I'll explain it to you.
Absolutely.
I will. I'll take the time.
Because
if you didn't bother,
somebody
then
was to meet you in the middle of putting in some effort to learn.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't mind teaching. I teach, I've taught multiple mead classes and had very good results. I like to teach, but I also want the students to be interested enough to do some of their own work. So that's always a challenge, especially on the internet. There's it's one of those things, but it's one of the things that keeps, like you said, some of the old guys who really know stuff, who can actually help you, it keeps them from responding. So it's just part of the nature of the internet and the world we're in today.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Well, that and us quote unquote old people, I mean, I get, and Ryan, I give you a hard time about this sometimes, but I know you do voice to text, but I'll get like 3-page text from Ryan sometimes, but I'm like, I type, yep, nope. Okay. I mean, and AJ can attest to this. I don't type long answers because I just
typing on a friggin' touch phone.
Thank you.
Oh no, on a computer that's different.
That's
Computer,
a different
phone,
thing. Yeah.
definitely not.
On a
Phone,
computer it's
absolutely
different, but on my phone, I mean, like, good God, I got fat fingers.
I don't even have fat fingers, and I got fat fingers.
That and Apple has a funny idea what word it is I'm trying to type half the time. So
there's a lot of really good information out there, and
really is.
Granted, sometimes you have to wade through some of the bad stuff, and it's especially for a beginner, it can be difficult to tell the difference between good and bad.
And it's only going to get worse with AI bullshit coming up.
Probably true, but because all they do is steal, they don't create.
Yeah, they don't.
Mm-hmm.
They don't create. They just steal.
Wrong. I mean,
but some of that also comes with experience. So you're going to make that first mead or the 10th mead or whatever it is. Like Ryan was saying, well, the first ones he did from whatever came off the internet, they were all fusel and horrible. You didn't want to drink them.
Yeah, I remember those. I mean,
okay,
myself.
that's going to happen. That's part of the learning process, right? My suggestion there would be to do 1 gallon batches instead of like me. I jump in with 5 gallon batches, and luckily, I didn't really have a lot of failures to begin with because I did my reading and I had been brewing for a long time. So I had basic process under my belt.
Got fermentation under your belt,
Right. So I had a lot of advantages. Yeah. But for somebody who's never done this, please start with a 1 gallon batch because if it's fusel, you can dump it out and move on and you didn't spend too much money.
Yeah.
Or put it in the closet and see if it ages out. Sometimes
maybe it will. But you know what? Age can only fix minor problems. It cannot fix big ones.
Yep. Anybody that has
the other
developed
suggestion would be to make some session meads. In many respects, they're a lot more difficult, but they're also a whole lot cheaper, and the turnaround is a lot faster.
Yeah, you'll find out if you did it wrong while you're still remembering what you did.
Yeah, exactly. You'll be a month in, and it'll be done, and you'll be ready to move on to the next thing. If it didn't work, you're ready to go. If you start with a big mead, they're actually simpler to make and probably have a higher likelihood of coming out halfway decent, but you might be 6 months in before you find out that it's actually really bad. So, there's a whole bunch of different things you can do to speed up or learn, but you want to learn.
What just absolutely kills me? A guy will get on and he'll ask a question, and instantly all the parrots are telling what they've heard in the chat room. And before the guys they have 25 answers that are half-baked. Maybe they worked in one situation or the other, but nobody's even bothered to ask the guy, what is it exactly that you need help with? Show us your notes. Tell us everything you can of dosage, temperatures, timing, and only then can you begin to start to have a chance of making a fairly educated answer for these people. Mm-hmm. And it drives me crazy. And so I say, well, why don't you just go out and turn your lock on your gas tank counterclockwise for 3 times and you'll thank me in 6 months. And that just drives me crazy. Nobody even thinks to ask the guy, what did you do? Yeah. Because you guys, we can look at recipes and once you understand the process.
What was your process? Right? What was your starting gravity? Oh, I see. Now I can explain why this tastes like gasoline.
I actually brought that up in the mead class I was teaching last week to some of my beekeeper folks, and I was like, all right, so document, write down everything you do, write down all your measurements, write down, nutrients did you put in? When did you put them in? What was going on? Describe the thing. Take taste tests and, describe that. Get it all in there, because when something goes sideways, or, you want to be able to repeat it, you can't do that if you don't have good notes.
It's like you don't know something's wrong with your hive if you're not looking in your hive.
Thank you. Yeah, I lost my last one. I still don't have any idea what happened. So I'll be taking much
Sometimes
better
bees are just
notes
bees,
come
though.
spring.
Well, so one of the questions that comes up a lot in Facebook forums, I'm sure other places too, but somebody new will be out there and they'll say, why does my yeast or my mead taste sour? Right? Or,
Yeah. What's that really mean? Yeah.
Their vocabulary is very limited, and that's absolutely understandable, right?
Oh,
They don't have the experience, they don't have the training, all that stuff. So it's very hard to decipher those things. When they say sour, I tend to interpret that as tart, acidic, as opposed to being actually sour.
Yeah.
Because that's the more common outcome of a fermentation, right? It goes dry, and dry mead tastes very tart, not necessarily sour, but it can be, but usually not. And it just means it's too dry. So, again, they don't know where they started, so they don't really understand what happened when they finished fermentation. And, that's all part of the startup of the process, is to get through all that, develop the vocabulary and develop the experience, and of course get out there and taste some things too, right? And particularly if you can find some people in your area that you can meet up with, oh my gosh, your learning curve is going to accelerate so dramatically.
Yeah, so much better.
Yeah, I just saw on the mead Facebook group here in the past week, there was some guy posting that said, hey, is there anybody in Minnesota that makes mead? And I'm like, my very first response was, wow, dude, you have not been trying very hard.
Yeah. No, I would have just come back with, you're new, right?
I was very nice about it. I was. And I basically just said, like, oh my God, yes, there's a whole bunch of people here that are world-class mead makers in Minnesota. Yeah. And in fact, the Minnesota Homebrewers Association has their annual holiday party coming up here on the 17th on Saturday. And new members are welcome to attend. Don't be shy. Show up, because there's going to be people there with a whole bunch of really, really good mead that you can meet and learn from. I'll be very interested to see if any of those people actually show up, because there were like a dozen people who were like, oh yeah, I live in Minnesota, blah, blah. It's like, well, cool. Pay attention.
Yeah.
We'll see what happens. But you got to start somewhere, and finding a group is an excellent resource to take advantage of.
Yeah. If you have access to a group, I highly recommend it. I'm planning on starting one around here. So
yeah, you should. I mean,
I want to get up with the local
anybody in an area, find some people, create a group, do that, share, learn. That's how you get better. You really do.
Well,
so
Ryan, I want to change tasting lots of different things. I mean, that's,
yeah, of course. Buy some commercial mead, get some stuff exchanged from a friend or an acquaintance. Absolutely. I want to change subject slightly, Ryan. Tannin and the reduction of tannin. What do you think? How do you do it? I know what I've done, and I know how far I can get with it. But if you know anything different, I'm interested, because I have a mead that I made that is the most tannic thing I have ever encountered.
What is it?
It is a choke cherry mead that I made. Some friends gave me 13 pounds of choke cherries.
That'll do it.
I mean, I made a massive mead out of it. Oh, it tastes amazing. It really does.
Yeah.
But the finish.
But your tongue sticks to itself when you're done, right?
It does. It does. And I've hit it with.
That is a really good question.
Yeah,
so I've hit it with bentonite.
I know a whole bunch of different things that you can do.
Okay, so let me tell you what I've done, and you can fill in the blanks. I've done bentonite, which stripped away a little tannin. I've used gelatin, which stripped away a little tannin.
Which kind of gelatin, please?
Just standard, like culinary gelatin.
Okay.
Because that definitely strips away some tannin. and I find it with Kieselsaal and Cheetah Sand, and it's nice and clear.
Right.
But it's got a lot of tannin. I make a lot of red wine, and after 3 years in the bottle, they're coated in tannin on the edges of the bottle, all the way around the whole bottle. So time will let it drop out, but at this
but
point,
if it's still in suspension, it's still going to be tannic.
oh, I know, I agree,
Uh-huh.
and it's not bottled at this point; it's just in bulk.
Well, I understand.
So I'd love to strip a little more tannin out of it before I do bottle it. So any additional things I might be able to do.
Sure. Now here's where my COVID
This
comes
might help
in.
somebody else down the line too.
Yeah.
Yes.
absolutely.
One of the early things that I really liked, I had half the handbook memorized. I could tell you what page a lot of things was, and that's the Scott's Laboratory Handbook.
Yep.
For any of you guys out there that don't know that, you can get online and look up Scott's Laboratories Handbooks. You can download that. You can just save it on your computer to go back to them every time. And if you request every year, they'll send you a hard copy of their entire handbook. Now, these are people that spend their life putting together good products that help to make the best fermentations that you can. And so they have every intention in the world to make their stuff work as good as they can, because they want return customers. Well, they give you all of these questions. They give you the answers, just, like, do this, do that, do that. And it's very specific. They'll point you at different products that you can use. They'll tell you why they work and maybe where they won't do so well. And then they'll say, if this is your situation, then look over here and you use this guy. So inside of your handbooks, and I was trying to find the most recent one. I think I've got about 15 of them sitting around here in my house. And I can't imagine this. If you guys could imagine not having a rear view mirror in life, like whatever you just did an hour ago, you look in your rear view mirror and there's nothing in the rear view mirror because there's no mirror in the rear view mirror. That's what it's like having this COVID damage. So I can't tell you for sure, but there's I think one of them's called Polycell. But if you go in the portion of the handbook that's called SI Wise, and that's where you're going to find the Blanc Soft and the all of those things. There's some specific things that are made to help you strip the tannins. And I haven't had those problems myself, but I've given those answers to many people, and they've come back every time and said they worked great. And so I wished I could find this year's thing, because they have some brand new ones, I think, this year. Give me.
Oh, I know. I get that. I download that every year. I like the online.
Oh yeah,
version.
it's great. Yeah,
I
actually brought that up in my class, and I see people scribbling notes. They're like, "What? You get where?"
Yeah. Oh, I mean, I totally agree. Scott Lab Handbook is it's like the amazing Bible, resource.
Man.
Yeah, it is.
That sucker is amazing.
Kevin, there's 3 or 4 of those products in there that'll help you with the tannins.
Okay. Well, I mean, I have like a whole boatload of the tannin products, that kind of thing. But
like
I didn't
the tannin reach and all of those.
Oh yeah. But I didn't think they stripped tannins. That's what I'm trying to do.
There are about 3 or 4 in there that'll help do that. And if you want to send me your scoop one way or another, I can go find that tonight, and I can send you which ones are what.
If it's in Scott Lab's handbook, I can find it.
Yeah. I'm sure one of them's called Polycell.
I didn't think to look for that.
Yep. They have several things that are exactly for that.
Okay. Cool.
And you already know, but some people might. I think a lot of people don't know how to use different things to counterbalance other things in your meads.
Right.
And so, of course,
in this case, it's just tannin.
I understand.
Not up front. It's just all in the finish. So that's I need to knock it down.
So it's just got way too much grip and
oh yeah.
Yeah. This is a mead that can stick to the walls all by itself.
It really is. I mean, it's one of those things where, like, when I
How to
smell
determine
it,
if your
I'm like,
mead is done? Throw it against the wall, and
I'm
if it sticks,
I'm absolutely transported to another place when I smell it,
yeah.
and when I taste it, I just feel it's just so delightful. And then I get that finish, and it's
It choke
oh
on it
my
all.
gosh, I don't know if I can drink any more of this.
Right.
Yeah.
Arthur
Yeah.
just posted a link to Lalaman's Pure Lee's delicacy. It's the
Yeah, I'm gonna go look at
manoprotein
that.
that smooths tannins. Yeah.
Yeah, but that's more of a substitute for doing batonage, right? Where you age on your lees until they.
No, it says it preserves fruit, smooths, harsh tannins, and green profiles for a refined mouthfeel. Doesn't really say anything about lees. Hang on, let me open up the full description here.
Okay, they have a product called Sir Lee Aging.
Oh yeah, no, this is something
Oh,
different.
that's a little different though. That's
Right.
actually a
Okay.
different process.
I thought this was nodding towards that idea, though.
No, so this smooths harsh tannins and green profiles for refined mouthfeel, enhances fruit intensity and wine length with noticeable sensory impact, stabilizes colloidal structure, improving clarity and filterability, delivers fast results in days, mimicking long lees aging without extended contact. So it gives you some of that. Yeah.
The
So
only
they were
problem
kind
is $115, not including shipping.
Holy cow. Yeah. And they even have a pay in 4 interest-free installments.
Yeah, right. And it's for one little 2-gallon batch of mead. I don't think so.
Kidding me. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, that's why with my
Yeah.
3 gallons of
how big a package
high
this
bush
is.
cranberry pucker puss, I've just been letting time do it because when I
Yeah.
first made it, it smelled amazing.
Yeah, I know.
And I put it in my mouth and spit it right back out.
That's an option, I know, but I didn't
Yeah.
want to wait 3 or 4 or 5 years for this, you know.
Yeah.
I totally understand that.
You know,
Yeah.
and you're talking about the, waiting 3 or 4 or 5 years, which we've all done that with at least one.
Not me.
More than one.
I don't wait that long. No way, Jose.
But I mean, there are people who, like, you get, and you're like, yeah, we're gonna let this sit for a while. But that was one of the things that I see all over the place. And you're like, well, it needs to age for at least a year before you can drink it. And I'm like, no.
No.
And I had to emphasize that in the class I was teaching.
Only if you've done
Yeah.
something wrong.
Right.
Yeah.
That's my response
You've done it
always.
well, that sucker is going to be eminently drinkable right out of the bucket. And, and yes, will some improve with aging? Of course they will. There are means that, 20, 30 years down the line are amazing,
And
I
then
got
there's
mead
some that are really past their prime at 2 years.
Exactly.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I go case in point with one. Okay, so Monroe's Honey, which is a Canadian meadery, he makes a lot of fruit meads, and he had given me some bottles of stuff at one of the mazers, and I took them home and stashed them because I'm a hoarder. And yeah, right, as one does. And the next year I was like, oh, I'll take, and I'm packing up my crate of meads to take back and share with everybody, and I grabbed one of his. It was a blueberry, if I remember correctly. And I took it, and we're all sitting around at the tables after the words, chit-chatting and sharing meads and yada yada. And I brought that out and I said, hey, look what I brought, John. And he says, oh, when did you get that? And I said, yeah, last year. And he says, oh, you were supposed to drink that right away. And I'm like, well, yeah, I could have put that on the label. But he's like, yeah, this one was not designed to be aged. It just won't do well. And I said, well, let's open it and see. And he was right. I mean, we opened it. It wasn't drinkable. It was,
packaging can make a difference too. I mean,
there's
some really
he does
great mead makers out there that do the tea corks. When I see a tea cork, I'm like, okay, I know that I have to drink this.
Oh, tea cork. Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
No, this had a standard, like a Noma cork, regular cork, not the T-shaped ones. But it had a regular cork, and I mean, he's won any number of awards with his mead. I mean, he makes very good mead. But he said, I specifically tell people don't save that particular one, and there's like 2 or 3 other ones that he had that were saying they were to drink soon, not later. And I cringe every time I see somebody go, no, you've got to age it. And it's like, no, you don't.
Yeah. Well, my response always when I see those people say, you have to wait at least a year or 2, preferably.
That's so sad. It's like, why would you want to delay your gratification that long? Yeah.
That just means you did something wrong. If you have to wait, you did something wrong.
Yeah.
If you want to wait,
Awesome. Go for
That's
it.
experimental
That
then.
is a different thing entirely.
Yep. And that's what I tell people is like, look, put some of it aside. You know, bottle it up, stash it, and try to forget about it.
Yeah, I mean, I've got a
Open that
library.
up every year, you know.
I think
That's
I
what I
still have
call
a
it, is a
bottle of my.
library.
Library, yeah.
I still have a bottle of my first ever Joe's Ancient Orange.
I
Oh,
came
boy.
across a bottle of the strawberry I made 15 years ago.
Mm.
I'm almost
Thinking I might
afraid.
hold on to it to our 20th anniversary.
I'm almost afraid to open that strawberry.
Well, I think this is 20 years old now. It
Yeah.
might be 22.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I still got
Well,
a
I
bottle
think
of Gelato plywood.
there's a competition coming up in March that you might want to bring that bottle to.
And we can all find out how bad it's gone. I don't have a lot of hope for the strawberry. The pie mint held up beautifully. You know, it had a little bit of oxidation because I used it. And we've had that conversation, you know, and I'm going to be moving away from flip tops as long-term storage in future.
Sure.
But, you know, mainly because I was using them because, well, they're convenient. But, and I have a buttload of them. But, you know, it's like that. I was confident that would hold up because I knew I did it. You know, I did it well. It was good coming out of the bucket. It was blah, blah, blah. Strawberry, in my experience with anybody I've had, it just doesn't hold up.
Yeah, it's tough.
It's a tough one. Yeah. So I don't know. I figure, sure, I'll bring it. And if it's crap, we'll dump it, you know, and y'all can pick on me and fine. We'll just get over it.
You know what? A little humility goes such a long way.
Hey, when I brought the last bottle of the first batch of Chamerlot out at Mazer, the first two people I gave it to were, I think, Pete and Carvin.
Oh, that's a tough crowd.
Yeah, and I know Pete will tell me flat out. He'd be like, Vicky, what the hell were you thinking? He'd be getting all up in my business about it. You know, I mean, Pete pulls no punches, which is fine. I don't mind. It's just the way he is, you know, and I appreciate the honesty, even if it hurts a little bit. But, you know, I mean, to hear him go, you know what? Except for a little bit of oxidation, this is really good. I mean, and that's high praise coming from Pete.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
Yeah, my high praise moment was giving Carvin a Joe's Ancient Orange variation. I think it might have been my blackberry one, and having him tell me it was pretty good. And then I told him what it was, and his face did something really funny.
Yeah, people like to pick on that.
They do.
Blind tasting is always a good way to go.
Yeah.
It's not a terrible recipe. Like, it's not going to make stellar mead, but it doesn't make bad mead.
It makes a drinkable mead, you know. I mean, it's.
And then if you get into some of the variations, they can be really good. And the thing I like about bread yeast is it's at least pretty honest about when it's done.
You know, Joe is spinning in his condo down in Florida. Because you're variating, and it says right in the notes, don't change anything.
I know. But we've got to fuck with it.
Yeah, I know. We can't help ourselves. Sorry, Ryan. We kind of got off on a trail there.
Yeah.
I was wondering if we forgot that we were trying to teach something to somebody.
Well,
we're
in
still
a way,
teaching.
we kind of are. It's just a different method. But yeah, go on from where you were. You'll get used to it. This is just the way we are. It's been a while since you've been on.
I know.
So yeah, we got another 20 minutes or so of TV.
You have the microphone.
Yes, go for it.
Trying to remember where we got off the road.
We were on.
Kevin had just asked about tannins.
About tannins, but before that, you were talking about open ferments.
Well, I think we got past that, and I was talking about people build bear traps when there's no bears in that continent.
Yes, you did. Yeah.
People hedge for things that aren't really. Well, here's kind of where we got lost. Not that Kevin was wrong, but he mentioned that there are times that stuff can get infected. And then he started talking about beer, and I tried to pull us back onto the highway and say we're actually talking about mead here. You're right that beer is a different animal. And so here's a thing where I can kind of tell you this in an overall arcing concept, because what we were really trying to do was establish a new way to look at making mead by getting small, by realizing that if you look at the overall pie, closed fermentations are just a tiny sliver in time compared to the amount of time that open fermentations have been successful since the beginning of time. And they made that happen because the yeast taught them what was going on instead of them having any understanding that they could then try to overpower and force the yeast through, force and pressure to do this and that. The fact of the matter is the yeast are going to do what they want, whether you care or not, whether you understand it or not, and you're going to have a very difficult time bending their arm. And the more you understand of the process and why windows open up on the chemical, I like to call it the ticker tape, the biological and the chemistry ticker tape pours out. I also call that the road to follow the yellow brick road. The yeast are the guys that build the yellow brick road, but they only pour the concrete right in front of their tires as they're rolling down the highway. And they also then, that drum that turns to flatten it, that has the rune words in there, so to speak, where the yeast is telling you this is what we do. And that happens over and over and over all the time with very little variance, especially if you start looking at the variance through the overall picture through the lenses that look at the big concept instead of the minutia. And so once we start to understand that and learn those things, there are windows that the yeast and the chemistry and the biology will open up where you can bless what they're doing and give them things that if they don't have or they have very little of, you can help them to make that place really come alive. But if you don't know that, then you're not going to ever be able to take advantage of that little open window on the ticker tape. And then lastly, if you don't realize that this is a pot of chemistry from the very start, then you really haven't got a clue of what's going on inside your fermenter. Why do I keep calling it that? I've never called that in my life. And so we build hedges to protect us from things that I think are pretty ridiculous in the overall sense of things. For instance, we wouldn't dare want to give the yeast an open fermentation because they're going to get oxidized.
Yeah.
Well, listen, I oxidize with the pure O2 tank after I see life, and for the next 24 hours after I see proof, and I start looking for proof early on in the very tiny, small ways. If you angle so that you're looking on your meniscus early on, the very first thing you're going to see is little tiny pricks in the meniscus where the real tiny, small CO2 gases are coming through the meniscus. And so you see these little, like a little, I call it a blister. It's almost like a blister forms and it disappears. And once you can start to see that, and that's going on quite a bit, you already have proof that you have viable life inside there. And so then we used to say, well, shake the shit out of it and then people moved to a power drill and the lees stirrers, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, so now we know that, and people say, well, and most of the people don't even bother with any of this of trying to give the yeast O2. But it's very important, and we do a great job when we use Fermate O because we're gut loading our yeast when a window that's open only for less than 2 or 3 seconds, where the yeast they're packaged. When they come dry in the package, they look like those Mylar balloons that you can buy at King Soopers that you fill up with helium for people's birthdays. Mm-hmm. A yeast cell, when it's dry in your dry form, however you buy it, a 5-gallon thing, or I buy mostly 80 grams at a time, and sometimes 3 or 4 of one yeast in 80s. But anyway, those look scientific, specifically down under microscope. Those look like the folded Mylar bags that the balloons come in. When we put them in the right amount of temperature, and if we follow the instructions with the Go Firm, we're creating a very specific parts per million of dilution inside of the solution. And so when the yeast starts to unfold, if you If they start to unfold and the water is too cold, they won't unfold completely, and you'll have mothers that have creases in their bodies because they didn't get the right temperature. And so instead of being soft and pliable, they're kind of a little bit crunchy and they're cold, and so they don't open up entirely like they should at 104 degrees. And so right off the bat, you've wounded the moms before they even started thinking that they could divide. But also at that same space and time, think about getting small now and watch this happen when it's going on, and the mom is as big as a Volkswagen Beetle in front of you. There's a point where they start to become soft and tender, and immediately at that point, if you have the proper amount of GoFirm in there, it'll transfer into the open cell as it starts to happen. But the transfer will be very nice and polite because you don't have a transfer gradient. Water will always try to equalize itself, and so will pressure. Well, if you have an outside pressure that's greater than the void inside the yeast cell, it's going to rush in there and rupture the guts of the organella inside of the cell because you don't have the transfer gradient measured out right. And so that's why when they say use 1.25 amount of yeast that you use, and then you use 200 times that in the water, you do it at 104 degrees when you inoculate. All of these things are designed so that you can gut load your yeast without blowing them up. And if you wait too long, once you pour them in there, you've got a 2 or 3 second window that opens up and closes right away. And once it closes, now it controls its osmosis, and you've missed the window to gut load those guys with all the goodies that will set them up to become tremendous fighters and warriors at the end of the day. And so that's why now we see many times when a yeast says, well, we're good for 13%, but we find now that if we use the GoFirm and Fermentation, and there's substitutes for those too in other countries, but that's why now we know that a lot of the yeast strains will give you 2 or 3 and maybe sometimes 4% more ABV. That's because when we gave them the gut load of the Fermentation, and also when we dose them O2, that gives them the stuff they need to make a superhero yeast cell membrane. Yeast die once they have an ABV limit, and that varies a little bit from strain to strain, and it varies a little bit from one mead to the next, but more or less, as the ABV builds up, eventually their cell membrane starts to fall apart, and eventually the ethanol will find itself inside the yeast cell, and that's when they die of alcohol poisoning, because the ethanol will destroy the organella, and they don't have any pathways that allow them to do what they do. But if we give them all the right things that they need when they can use them, and so we're talking about the GoFirm, and now I'm swinging back to the O2 doses again. When we talk about atmosphere, the things that you and I breathe, it's about 19% oxygen and the rest is other gases. Well, you can't yeast demand for them to operate optimally, they want X amount of parts per million of dissolved O2 that they can then bring on board, and that will buff them out as strong of a Superman as they can be. Well, so here's the thing. I have an analyzer, and so I can measure all this stuff in real time when I'm doing anything. People can use a Finch pump and blow bubbles in there, but they're only using atmosphere. So even if they get the maximum potential that atmosphere can give to the yeast, They only get about half of what they would really like to have. But of course, some is better than none, right? And so even if all you do is shake the hell out of it for the first few days with some way to allow ingress of the O2 to become dissolved O2 in the suspension, you're giving them some building blocks that they wouldn't otherwise have. Well, also, if you give them pure O2 and you dose it with a centered stone on the end of a wand, and we're not trying to sandblast, the paint off of a truck, but we're dosing the O2, and you can give them maximum capacity where the slurry would no longer allow for any more dissolved O2 in suspension and stop. And an hour later, every bit of the O2 is gone because it's been assimilated by the yeast. All that is to say that when people, we got to put it under airlock because it's going to rust, or we call that oxidation, right? Capacity where the slurry would no longer allow for any more dissolved O2 in suspension.
Close page, T. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I hate my voice.
I was trying to respond to a comment, and yeah, sorry.
Gotcha. I hate hearing my own voice on a recording.
I'm the same way. Yeah,
drives me crazy.
Yeah.
But so anyway, my point is this: people think, well, I got to lock this up because I don't want it to oxidize. Well, at that point in the game, the yeast want every bit of O2 that you can give them. Now, let's move on when they go anaerobic. Now they're creating CO2. Well, you know what? When you're making a 45-gallon batch of mead in a 50-gallon trash can, you leave it open and you can barely tell that there's anything coming off the top. And yet, in the unseen world, there's a huge gaseous explosion that looks like a volcano erupting, where all of that CO2 is coming out of suspension. All of the bugs and all the things that we're worried about getting inside of our must, they can't swim upstream hard enough to even get to the surface of your stuff. And then secondly, when you've got most people under pitch, I teach to use 2 grams per gallon until you get to 1140, and then you switch over to 5 grams a gallon. Yeast is one of the cheapest things we use when we make mead. And there's tons of reasons why you want to use what I'm telling you. And in fact, those numbers came right out of the Scots Laboratory Handbook, but they're talking about portions of a kilogram to hectoliters of volume. But I did the math and broke that all down. And so people say, oh my God, you're pitching so much yeast. Grandpa used to use a 5-gram package and he could make a whole 55-gallon drum of wine with that. Well, maybe he did, or maybe that's bullshit. But either way, that doesn't ensure that his wine was any good, right? I mean, people say, well, this or that. Here's what I hate. Well, the Vikings didn't do it. You know what? The Vikings were smart. And I'll promise you this, if they knew what we know, they would have jumped onto our stuff instantly. I'm a very elitist in making traditional archery gear. I've made over 300 self bows in my time. Some of them are some of the fastest bows that you can make, and there's ways that we can test that. But anyway, and then a fly pit. The rooms are always the same. You've got the naysayers, the people that don't want to learn, the guys that are trying to teach people, and they get all the heat because they're exposing how much or how little these other people claim to know, but really don't. But the problem is when we're ignorant and we believe what we've been told because we've heard it so many times over and over, you think, well, gosh, it must be true because everybody in this group says the same thing. And so the parrots learn how to sing 15-part harmony because that's what everybody else sings. And yet nobody ever took the time to go see if the lyrics in the song made any sense. And most of the time it doesn't, or it's only half-baked. It bothers me that the so-called teachers in our craft They might have the biggest following on YouTube, but when they teach stuff that they don't know about, they might know enough to sound like they know something. But oftentimes, if you really understand it, you go, my gosh, this is so wrong in so many spots that it's almost a hindrance instead of a help.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you multiply that by 100 people teaching you how to sing in harmony with the parrots, I've said forever, the internet is the absolute worst place to go to learn how to make mead. And so anyway, going back to what we talked about with being concerned about oxidation. Oxidation doesn't happen until, let's go back to my 50-gallon trash can making mead. It could seem like there's nothing going on, and let's just say you're at 1020. If you take and put your trash can mead into a bunch of 6-gallon carboys and put an airlock on them, suddenly and I hate when people count bubbles, but suddenly there's so much gas coming off of there when it's being funneled into a little 1.5-inch circle at the top of your thing that the bubbles are going nonstop, rapid fire machine gun.
Mm-hmm.
But your senses is saying there's nothing going on there, and now it's going to get all full of oxygen. Nothing could be further than the truth.
Yeah, if it's bubbling, there's no way it's going to oxidize.
No way. And yeah, because oxygen can't swim upstream, right? And what I mean that is the gas is what's the word?
Exchange.
Yes, thank you. It's just not going to happen. And so then people say, oh, well, I had a guy the other day, and Vicky, you were in part of this conversation.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't want to open up his vessel because it was going to get infected. So he pitches everything right up front.
Mm-hmm.
That's another misnomer. How is it going to get infected if you've cleaned everything from the start? If you're pitching yeast at the proper cell count, it's going to kill everything that's organically even has the slightest chance of living in the conditions before we even start talking about yeast that will kill everything else in its house because it wants to live there instead of them. And if most of the wild yeast can't even make 3% ABV, they're going to die the first day that you start making a fermentation, right? And so then we have all these misnomers. Well, we better do this or that. But once you really understand what's going on down in Mead City, living down there on a microscopic level, you realize that we hedge our bets so much on things that the science would prove that you're just so misunderstanding in this thing that you're not even close to getting the truth to consider it the way that you should. And so that's why I like to get small, go in there and live with those little guys. Yeast at the proper cell count, it's going to kill everything that's organically.
There we go. Sorry.
That's all right.
Yeah. Somebody that asked a question, I was trying to get to it, and it's like, where is it?
Right. And so then this is my point. We've grown up in a world where the wine guys bring their pluses and minuses to the mead world. The beer guys bring their pluses and minuses to the mead world. People that don't know nothing except they've heard of parrots singing in harmony forever. That's got to be true. And so then anytime a new person comes in, even if you're a parrot that's only lived in there for a week and a half, you know more than the new guy. And so suddenly now, guess what? You're the big dog. You're the teacher. And so that's why the internet is the worst place in the world to learn how to make mead.
I'm sure there's some places recommending putting acid in up front.
Yeah, I would say, okay, not all of the internet.
Well, you know what I'm meaning.
Yeah.
I have a tendency to talk in absolutes, but what I really mean is it's almost absolute, but there are certainly, exceptions. So that should be understood when you know.
I try to keep got meat on the up and up. I
know, and I do. I try to keep anywhere that I feel like I want to invest my time. You know what? I don't want to call people out and make them feel small or stupid because we all start at some place.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And some of us are fortunate to have people in front of us that had some mercy on us and took us under our wings. Some of us just learned this stuff the old-fashioned way, like I did, and it sounds like Kevin did, and you guys, you ladies, have done the same thing.
There wasn't anybody in front of us to learn from.
Right, exactly.
Back in those days,
Not
you had
in
to
my
just
case.
go out and figure it out. Yeah, you came in and you had a little bit to work with there, but yeah.
I had a lot to work with. I had all these people in front of me who knew stuff, and they passed it
Yeah.
on, and we share. And yeah, I was fortunate.
Yeah.
So that's all I wanted to do was say that if people are interested, there's a new way to look at things. And here's the thing too, if you start talking about the math and the minutia of the science too early, people get bogged down with that, and they fail to realize that the yeast can tell the story that you really need to pay attention to, and you can understand their story without having a single number plugged into the story, because you just stand behind the yeast and you walk down the yellow brick road and they show you what's up. And so you can learn all of this really just alone in a concept and a positioning yourself into this, being small and considering looking at it that way instead of the jolly green giant up there doesn't even realize there's a living culture in his thing. He doesn't know that they're going to do what they want to do for the most part, regardless of what you do or don't do. However, you could do things that aren't necessarily advantageous, but if you don't do some things, you're going to pay the price in a huge way, right? We offend the yeast, and when we do that, they're unhappy and they have to.
We make the job harder.
Yeah, well, so here's how I explain that. Imagine if you were a framer and you've got a foundation in the ground, and the builder makes a cut pack, and so then the truck, the flatbed pulls up, he lifts up his flatbed, and the stuff slides off the truck onto the ground by the footings, or the concrete form. And now you've got all that stuff, and all you have to do is cut it up to fit, right? So it's cut to fit. It's very easy. It's already made. It's already in the dimensions that come as close as it can to your actual real life dimensions. And so now you can start to build a house. Let's look at it now from the yeast's point of view. But then turn it back to the framers.
We're going to have to, I'm sorry to jump in. We're going to have to start winding down because we're coming up on that 2 hours.
Yeah, I was ready to be done.
You guys are always going, they need to be shorter. It's like, right.
Well, I wanted to quit at an hour and a half, but
that wasn't going to happen, Ryan.
That's where we got lost.
Yeah.
Well, okay, but we've talked about it, and I'll just leave it at that. But so here's the thing. Imagine if the truck, instead of bringing you a cut lumber pack with plywood and joists and 2x4s and all of that, what if they just backed up the truck and there's a huge tree that's 16 feet in diameter and 40 feet long, and they go, there's your lumber, there's your wood.
Ouch.
Well, that's what we do when we don't give yeast what they need. They have an ability to then chemically open up new pathways, and they can create things from nothing. But part of the exhaust fumes of when they're working and making things from nothing by going through different pathways, the results of that is the off flavors, the things that smell and taste bad. That's like putting milk in your truck and expecting that the exhaust out the tailpipe is going to smell normal.
Yeah.
And so that's what happens when we don't take care of our yeast. And so if we do this again, I'm not going to tell you what you can do in the first 4 or 5 days of making your mead, but I can tell you it's very easy. It's almost doesn't cost very much at all. And it doesn't take more than a couple minutes. But the end result at the end of the day, imagine if you could open up a mead that's been bottled for 15 years and the aroma just will knock you off your feet where everybody in the room can smell it from 20 feet away. We've all made mead that smelled absolutely wonderful, and when you taste it, it's a letdown because the aroma is so much better than the mead.
Yeah.
But more often than times than not, we make something that it tastes good, but it's flat and dead on the aroma.
Yeah.
I can teach you some things where you can build a trellis. And so when we look at grapes and a grapevine and the roots and all that, they have the wires there. That's the structure that allows those grapes and all of that to attach itself to the structure. So that's the trellis that gives it a place to live. We can give our aromas a place to live, so they can sit down in a chair in the bus. Those chairs comes with a seat belt. And so we can give each one of those guys, each one of our volatiles, aroma-wise, a place to sit down in the bus. And so then when the big windstorm comes, when it starts fermenting vigorously, you're not blowing all of your aromas right out the pot because they're sitting in a chair with a seat belt on it. And they'll sit there until you open up the mead 20 years later. And it takes nothing to do this. There's a few other chemical pieces, but at the end of the day, you've upped your game by 200 or 300% just doing one small change because you met the yeast at the only place that this happens. And by honoring it and giving them just a couple little extra 2x4s that they don't have to make, you can give them a seat to sit down and live in, and you will have aroma galore every time in every mead.
Nice.
I'm done.
I don't think it's going to be a question whether you'll be coming back. So,
All right.
Don't see that as a problem at all.
Okay.
But yeah, that's good stuff.
Well, thank you. So then, when people come back next week, I'm leaving you hanging now, so you will come back next week.
Week after next, but yeah.
But so what I want to do first is to get us to all get small. All of us jump inside of our fermenter and consider that there's things that the yeast can teach us. There's things that most of the history in mead world has not done what we do because they weren't confused. They didn't even know science existed, so they had to learn from repeatability. But then when science came around, we started overriding the rules of the game, and we started forcing ourselves on top of what was inevitably going to take place, whether we wanted it to or even knew that it could.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, we're just stepping all over our yeast at every turn. And it's because we don't have the proper understanding.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking forward to the one where we do the 5 first steps, easy peasy and not very expensive.
Mm-hmm. Well, so here's what I was thinking for those of you that are listening and new. In 29, I think it started on 9/5/17. That's when we
started the series.
We started the series. It was I hate to say it's because people think I'm proud and arrogant. I'm really not, but here's something about living in these chat rooms. When somebody comes in and they're confident because they've paid the tax, they've learned, and they understand all the things so that they could bring receipts to the table, that guy's confidence is going to come across as he's proud and arrogant, and he thinks he knows everything more than everybody else, even though all you're seeing in real life is confidence. We lose all of that understanding when we read somebody's linear words on a piece of paper with ink.
Yeah, there's no emotions in chat.
That's right. That's right. And so I'm one of the most attacked guys on the internet, and it's mostly because of that. When people know me and they can talk to me in person and read my body language and my expressions and all that, I think I get along with damn near everybody.
Yeah.
But yeah, and so that's some of the problems that exist and has existed forever since we don't, we can talk all over the world, but we're not in real life person right there to see and smell and all of that. And so much of what we communicate gets lost in the mix.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so we will go on, but what I want to first do is always walk first and foremost with the pros which is another word for the way we position ourselves, right? Our attitude and our stance towards these things. We want to get small and jump inside of Mead City. And then once we learn the process, then and only then can we actually attach the minutia. And the last thing, the minutia is probably the least important in one sense. And that's the quantifiable, you need this much of that, and the temperature, all of that, that's easy to teach somebody. But what's not easy to teach is for them to have an understanding that only comes when you learn the science and the biology of this psychedelic pot called mead that lives inside of a glass container or whatever containers you use.
Mm-hmm.
And so we can choose to be ignorant, and that's fine. A lot of people, all they want is a recipe. But some of us love the science. A whole bunch of us would love the science if we understood it and looked at it by being small and realizing that, hey, my meat is a pot of science and biology. That changes your whole perspective of what making a meat is about.
Yep, it does.
I'm done.
You keep saying that.
I know, but I really am.
You really are.
For now.
All right.
now.
All right. I'm going to take you at your word on this one. Okay.
All right.
So I hope that you guys like this. We got a lot of activity on the chat and in Discord. So I'm guessing that the answer to that is yes. And there was actually quite a lot of activity over on Facebook as well. So, excuse me. So I think, guys, we can say that Ryan will be back. I don't know when exactly yet, but I'll let you know. And in the meantime, coming up, we've got, I haven't got anybody scheduled for the end of the month yet, should shortly. And then February 10th, we've got Roger Warner with WA Meadworks. Events coming up. January 15th, Pine Smoke Bee Company in Eustis, Florida has a monthly meetup. They're having a gathering for home mead makers. So if you live down in the Eustis area, it's over in the general direction of Orlando, then probably want to take a look at that. January 17th, /O Meadery. This is a new one for me. Nacogdoches, Texas. They're having a bonfire and mead. I like their approach. That's pretty cool. January 18th, the Michigan Mead Coalition at Cadillac Straits Brewing Company in Madison Heights, Michigan is doing a beginning mead making class. January 22nd, Nucleus Mead in Linesville, PA is doing a mead and read. Bring your books, and it's just a book discussion. January 23rd, Mead Krieger Meadery in Loveland, Colorado is doing their 3-year anniversary party. January 24th, Four Brothers Mead in Festus, Missouri has Zoe Vox live music. January 24th, Hive 5 Meadery in Kingman, Arizona has music and mead with the Park Rangers. January 26th, Batch Mead in Temecula, California has yoga, mead, and pancakes. Interesting confluence there. I really like that.
That girl joined.
And we lost AJ and then she came back. Oh, hang on, let me get her back in here.
I don't know what's going on.
I don't know. Yeah, you dumped and then you came in. I don't know what's going on with the software. I might have to look for more software. Okay, January 31st, St. Ambrose Meadery in Beulah, Michigan has a barefoot music party. February 6th, Reds on 7th in Delavan, Wisconsin, meads and masterpiece, mead tasting and wine glass painting. February 13th, Starlight Meadery at the Honeysuckle Tea House in Chapel Hill, North Carolina is having a Valentine's mead tasting. February 14th, Be Immortal Mead in Round Rock, Texas has a Valentine's mead workshop. February 18th, Lancashire Mead Company at the Jorvik Viking Center in York in the UK has a mead tasting event. February 28th, Grimsby Hollow Meadery in Middleville, Michigan has Drink Mead, Learn Things, and Anatomy of a Killer When Doctors Become Predators. You come up with some of the neatest subjects. Just really out there, you know. March 20th and 21st, Kevin, for Valkyries?
March 21 or 20 and 21, yes.
20 and 21, Valkyries Horn Mead Competition in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Entries are open. This is both home and commercial. Get your entries in. They're filling up fast.
And also, Domrus Cup is open for those interested in Georgia.
Good. Thank you.
Yep. So take a look at that if you have the interest.
Yeah. I think, is Orpheus this early?
That I
No.
don't know.
Yeah.
The only
Morpheus is
other
way
one
with
that
it.
I know that's
Okay.
currently open, that's mead only, is Valhalla.
Oh, Valhalla's open too? Okay.
It's under new management. They don't have very many entries at this point. I think it's going to be a very small competition this year due to all the problems they had last year.
Yeah.
So they're in the process of kind of rebuilding credibility there. But if you have the interest, that's another option for you.
Good deal. Thanks, Kevin. April 11th, and I'm just doing this one this early because it's a ticketed event. Mershon's Artisan Cider in Stoughton, Wisconsin has the Wisconsin Cider and Mead Festival. Looking at that, I want to find out where Stoughton, Wisconsin is and see if it's something I can go to. And of course, support your local meadery. If you don't have a local meadery, then you can go to shopmeads.com, find meads from all over the country, and most of them ship to at least 40 states. So it's a good chance that your state is one of them. Mine is not, but that's the way it is. So, and of course, if you want to get your event on Got Mead Live, feel free to email us at gotmead@gotmead.com and we'll put it up for you on the next show. In the meantime, we'll see you guys in 2 weeks and be excellent to one another.
Night, everybody.
Night.
Good night, all.
Night all.